We're going to go ahead and get started. Nice to see many of the faces here this morning. Hopefully, y'all had a chance to have some snowball fights last night. It's nice to see that the snow is still out there this morning if you want to continue those snowball fights. Gene's going to lead us in the invocation. Gene, if you don't mind.
Certainly. You bow your heads. Lord, thank you for this day, for work and play, family and friends. Thank you for the many blessings you bestow upon each of us and on the world, especially through the efforts of this Rotary Club and all Rotary clubs and other elements of Rotary International. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Gene. Okay, so let's see if we have any guests with us this morning. If you see anybody that I'm missing, it looks like it's all Rotarians from my purview, except for our speaker. Okay. Okay, I don't think there's any guests. If you're a guest, speak up, and maybe I just don't see you on my screen. Otherwise, we'll move over to announcements, brags, anything notable you want to mention. Please feel free to share.
Let me make one quick announcement. The farmers, as of last night, the Farmers to Families program was still on this morning. I have no idea whether it still is or not. I mean, if the roads are risky to be on, I would guess that they would not want folks coming out to collect, but I just don't know. And one other thing I was going to say, while I love, I'll look forward to going back to meeting in person. I do look forward to seeing you guys on Zoom at least every week. So
thank you, Mark, and thank you for keeping us up to date on the on what's happening with the Farmers for Families and that information. I know it's very helpful for the families that need it.
It is, and it will go on next Monday as well.
Okay. And I concur that I do enjoy seeing everybody. If I'd rather see in person, but I'll take Zoom over not seeing anybody at all. So, okay. Any other announcements? I just want to make a quick one. I want to thank Cynthia, Sheila, Brenda, Amanda Hazy, Pat and Roger for helping celebrate the Mardi Gras last week at the senior center. It wasn't what it normally is. There's normally a lot of cake and celebrations and music. We skipped the cake. We had some music, but there were a lot of smiling faces. So you can even see them smile behind the masks. I know they appreciated our support. I know the interim executive director did, so it was a lot of fun. I'm glad Rotary was able to continue putting a smile on seniors' faces for Mardi Gras. So thank you to everybody, especially Cynthia for coordinating from Florida. Okay, if there's no other announcements, we'll move over to club business. I don't really have a lot on the agenda this morning, aside from I talked to Debbie yesterday about Madison Street Festival and our involvement in Madison Street Festival. So the Madison Street Festival Committee is starting to plan that, like if it's going to happen. That's in October. That's, I think, the first Saturday of October. Whether it happens or not, that's a different story, but they're planning like it's going to happen. So we're seeing how Rotary is going to be involved this year. Normally we have a booth. This year, if we are involved, we may end up in a more prominent area, a teen area, and if that happens, maybe we can get our Interact Club involved as well in planning what that teen area looks like in Madison Street Festival. So Debbie and I just started that conversation yesterday. There'll be more to come on that. We might appoint a liaison from our club to just be part of that Madison Street Festival committee if we're going to have a more prominent role in Madison Street Festival. So more to come on that. Any other club business before we move on to my slides? Yes, Cynthia.
I just need to find out where the decorations are. If they've been put back in the, I know it's been, you guys have been snowed in, but does anybody know where they actually are?
For the senior center?
Mardi Gras. Yeah.
Yeah, so Sheila grabbed a couple. I think Sheila's on the Zoom. She grabbed what you gave her, but as far as the decorations are concerned, I haven't followed back up with the senior center. So are we talking about the two? Yeah, so I haven't followed up with them, so I'll follow up with them to see if we can get those back.
Don't worry about it. I'll just do it, and then I'll get in touch with Fred, and we'll get them back into the shed whenever the road's clear.
Yeah, I think Sheila and I were trying to keep our fingers from getting frostbitten while we were out there. So we just grabbed what we could and left. But yeah, the other decorations were still up. I didn't even think about it until you just mentioned it right now.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks.
Thanks, Cynthia. So you're going to take that. Okay. Any other club business before we move over to my slides and then move over to our speaker, Mr. David Young? Okay. You share my screen here. All right, and we're going to hear from our park ranger about Wheeler National Park in just a moment. On Rotary news, so some of us are good at multitasking, some of us not so much. And last week somebody shared this slide with Fred or with me, and I think we're multitasking over here, and we're just resting our eyes for anybody who's wondering what's going on in this picture. So is it fair to all concerned? I wouldn't have shared it unless I had my eyes I'm suspect there. So Fred is multitasking as well. So it was a great speaker. I loved hearing about the bike. So they just caught us in the moment of I don't know, multitasking there. So just a little bit of fun. Fred, anything you want to share about this one?
No, I'm good. That was just a second.
I agree. They just caught us in a second there. Okay, I'm sure we'll all be wide-eyed for David's presentation today. All right, a couple of birthdays. I didn't see Roger on the Zoom. Roger's birthday is today, so happy birthday, Roger. Of course, that's Pat Cross's husband. He's in our satellite club, so happy birthday, Roger. And then Roderick's birthday, Roderick Matthews, Brenda's husband, is next week on the 24th. So happy birthday, Mr. Roderick. And next week, of course, today we have Wheeler National Wildlife. Next week, we have Madison Hospital update. Sunset Club the meeting was canceled on Tuesday. I think Tim was sick. And then we have Madison Utilities later this month. So a couple of great programs to finish off February and start March. With that, I think I took up too much time last week, so I'm gonna end my portion of it and turn it over to John Rice so he can introduce our speaker. John?
All right. Hey, thank you, Peter. And I'm really pleased this morning to introduce Ranger David Young from the nearby Wheeler Wildlife Refuge. And David's going to speak this morning about the refuge, its mission, its natural features, its wildlife, especially the waterfowl you see, especially this time of year. So David works as a visitor service park ranger. Among other things, he helps manage the refuge's public use and volunteer programs. And he joined the staff at Wheeler just recently in 2019, but he's worked as a park ranger at several other locations. And I was chatting with him before we got started. Acadia is one refuge in Maine that I'm certainly looking forward to going to at some point. That was one of his stops. Please welcome David this morning as he generously takes time out of his busy schedule to describe what's really a national treasure at our doorstep. Ranger Young, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. I will just say one thing this morning. I understand if you do have to rest your eyes. It's been a rough week, so I understand that. But thank you for having me this morning. Like John said, my name's Dave, and I feel lucky to have been able to move to North Alabama to work here at Wheeler National Wildlife Refuge. You should be able to see my crane and geese friends here right now. Several years ago, I came to visit a colleague who worked at the refuge, and I pulled into the visitor center driveway indicator and saw about 5,000 sandhill cranes, one of which you see on the left-hand corner there. And it just blew me away that there was a place anywhere that could have 5,000 of these huge 5-foot birds. So that really sparked my interest in working specifically here at Wheeler National Wildlife Refuge. So real quick, return to high school civics. The National Wildlife Refuge system is a series of over 500 pieces of federal land that are set aside for wildlife and habitat conservation. We're managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is a sub-bureau of the Department of Interior. So we do fall within the federal government system under the executive branch. I suspect you all were already well aware of that, but we're a sister agency to the National Park Service, who I've also worked with in the past. So the mission of the National Wildlife Refuge system is to administer a set of lands that conserves, manages, and sometimes restores plants, animals, and their habitats in the United States. And the reason for even doing that in the first place is to benefit today's American citizens and tomorrow's. So it's one of those missions that's a little bit tough because we're trying to provide enjoyment, wildlife enjoyment for people today, but also 100 years from now. So kind of a cool thing. I get behind that mission, and I think most everybody would as well. So what I'd like to do is start off with a quick orientation film just to show you a year in the life of Wheeler. Some of the wildlife that you might see. Many of you have probably been to the refuge, but you might find something in here that you haven't seen before. So let me move to that one moment.
David, the audio is a little choppy, but we're getting the gist of it.
Okay. If it gets too bad, let me know and I'll stop.
Maybe you could just tell us what the audio is saying, if you know.
Sure. So I'll just kind of narrate from here if that works for you. Is my audio choppy right now?
You're good.
Okay. So we're going through the seasons right now, and okay. So obviously Wheeler is known as a waterfowl destination this time of the year. You're seeing snow geese there on the Limestone Bay, just south of Mooresville, is where this was taken. That's a good spot for seeing snow geese and white pelicans during the winter months, and by the thousand, as you can see here. It's also a popular kayaking location there in the Mooresville area. Of course, your sandhill cranes in the snow are most easily seen at the visitor center. We get migratory songbirds in the springtime. Usually April and early May is our best time as far as beautiful singing songbirds as they head north to their breeding grounds. Of course, bluebirds, you may have those in your own yards, but they're fun to view nonetheless. Spring brings on a whole new new set of new life that we all appreciate after putting up with winter. It really changes things. It's quieter in the sense of we don't have the sandhill cranes and the ducks like we have in the winter, but we get osprey. You'll see their nest on power lines near the water. The bald eagle is back in North Alabama, as well as our egrets and herons take to our waterways. You'll see some of those osprey nests off of Highway 67. If you drive it and you look on TVA's power lines, those are osprey nests. Little green heron there. Of course, our deer. We do offer limited hunting opportunities on the refuge. It's something a lot of people are surprised by on a wildlife refuge, but that is part of our mission. Fall is a great time to look for butterflies. We don't mow our roadsides until early fall to be able to provide pollinator habitat. And the Madison County part of the refuge in particular, I've seen some really great butterflies out there in the late summer. Turtles and alligators. We do have about 100 alligators on the refuge from the estimates from UAH. Green anole, the cottonmouth, beautiful from afar. Of course, it is a venomous snake, so keeping your distance is helpful. But those are more of your warm season wildlife to observe. Some of your water mammals. We do have otter, a few otter, beaver. There's your otter there. And of course, can't leave out the plants. Our plant habitats are what our wildlife populations are based on. So, and you'll see a little later, a lot of our work revolves around maintaining habitat. So we are moving into the fall season here. Mid-November is when we usually see the return of our ducks, our sandhill cranes, and the endangered whooping cranes. You'll see the endangered whooping crane is the white of the two cranes. It's almost a foot taller than the sandhill crane. Have some of our ducks here. There we go. So the sandhill crane population has really grown in the last 20 years. Many of you who are from this area may remember a time when there wasn't a population of sandhill cranes of this number. It's taken just about 100 years to recover from almost driving them to extinction, the gray sandhill cranes. But we're excited to have enough to be able to host a hunting season in the state, not on the refuge, but in the state of Alabama. The whooping crane was down to 15 individuals in the 1930s, and we're right around 800 in the world right now. And the 20 or so that we see in the winter at Wheeler are part of a population that migrates between Wisconsin and the Southeast United States. Most of the whooping cranes migrate between Canada and Aransas, Texas. Of course, Wheeler is a strange refuge in the sense that it was the first to be built basically on top of a reservoir, Wheeler Reservoir. So it was more of an experiment in 1938 when it was established, in the hopes of providing waterfowl habitat. A lot of our areas that we flood for habitat were originally used by TVA for mosquito control. So it's I guess in a lot of ways the creative use of an area that was flooded for flood control and power by TVA. So it was a unique partnership, and one that I would say has been very successful since then. So kayaking is becoming very popular. As many of you know, you couldn't find a kayak at stores this past spring. Bird watching, wildlife photography, fishing. You just need your whatever state license is required is all you need to have with you to fish on the refuge. We do have a lot of water on the refuge, whether it be Flint Creek or the Tennessee River, Limestone Bay I mentioned earlier. There is access actually from Triana as well, and on the south side of the river from Coteco Creek. We have an archery season for deer, small game season as well. So there are a lot of hunters that use the refuge. It's great to be able to provide something for folks that don't have private land to hunt on. Wheeler's able to help provide a place for them. Environmental education. The Huntsville City Schools has sent every third grader, almost every third grader from their district to the refuge for over 40 years during the waterfowl season. So it's a great way to expose our young people to something that is theirs. And of course, the development of Decatur and especially Huntsville, Madison is a wonderful blessing for the refuge, but also poses challenges. And so we're excited to try to provide as much of an outdoor recreation opportunity, wildlife-based, as we can in a place that is probably going to need that open space more and more as we continue to grow. So we're excited to work together to make that possible, to continue to make that possible. So a lot of water, a lot of wetlands, and a lot of birds is one way you could sum Wheeler up. A lot of sounds too. Whenever you have a lot of birds, you have a lot of really interesting bird song, especially the cranes. So if you spend enough time out on the refuge, you might get to see things like that egret eating a fish. It never gets old. If you're in the right place at the right time, the more time you spend out there, the more things you tend to see. It's one of the things I love about working in a place like this and visiting places like this is you always see something new, always learning something new. And to me, it's very refreshing. And this past year, I think all of us probably felt that at some point in time. I see somebody had a chat. What about the alligators? Yeah. So I'll say something quick about the alligators because there's actually a lot of stories out there about the alligators. The real quick summary on the alligators is that there were reports from fishermen back in the 1800s of a few alligators in this area. No one can say if they were wild alligators or if they were released pets at that point. But in the 70s, I think it was, when the American alligator was on the endangered species list, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service brought alligators from southern Louisiana and released them at Wheeler to provide a population away from the coast in the case of a hurricane wiping them out. There were some politics that happened, and a politician asked the Fish and Wildlife Service to remove them. If you know anything about alligators, that doesn't work. You can't really catch all of them once you release them. So we did try to catch as many as we could after that decree came down. Obviously, it was unsuccessful, and we do have around 100 alligators that live on the refuge. I think the weather is the biggest thing that keeps their population down. Unless unless it gets warm enough in the future, we won't have a huge alligator population here. So no, we did not release them for beaver control. If you hear that, it's a well shared myth, but they were originally released here to be a backup population in case the coastal population died off, which, as you can tell, never happened. Luckily, the American alligator recovered very well, and we have more than enough in the southeast. So Wheeler National Wildlife Refuge is actually, we're in a complex of 7 other refuges in North Alabama. Several of them are cave refuges in Jackson County to protect endangered bat species. The Cahaba River is one of the most biodiverse rivers in the country. And watercress darter is an endangered fish that we protect in spring-fed streams in Birmingham. So we actually manage those refuges here from our staff in Decatur. We have about 10 of us that work full-time in Decatur, and 1 staff person works in Anniston at Mountain Longleaf Refuge. So it's a challenge to manage land across the state, but we do the best we can. And of course, Wheeler is the largest refuge. So we spend most of our time here in North Alabama. We span Madison, Limestone, and Morgan counties. You can see the green here is our refuge boundary. We have about 100 miles of roads that people bike, walk, drive on during times of the year when they are open. Gate schedules change based on road conditions, based on when the waterfowl is here. We try a lot of our management is around ducks and geese. But we do see about 650,000 visitors each year is our best estimate. Really hard to estimate that when you are looking at this large of a property that runs between Decatur and Redstone. I won't belabor this point, but FDR was the president who created the refuge in 1938 as a breeding ground and wintering ground for migratory birds, wintering ground for the ducks, geese, and cranes, breeding ground for other songbirds and other wildlife during the summer. So inviolate sanctuary is just a term we use to try to provide undisturbed habitat for ducks. Winter is a rough time for wildlife. They're just trying to put on the fat to survive and then fly back to the northern plains where most of our ducks breed in the summer. So trying to provide as much undisturbed feeding time as we can puts them in a better position to successfully breed, and also provides a hunting opportunity for hunters across the country as well. And of course, providing wildlife recreational opportunities is a big part of what we do. There's several other congressional legislation that we also work with. The Endangered Species Act is one. We have probably about 15 species that are listed as endangered that we protect on the refuge. So what do we actually do? We do a lot of farming. So cooperative farming is the way we provide food for most of our ducks and our geese. Farmers are allowed to farm on the refuge, and in return they leave about 15% of their crop for us to use for crane food, for duck food, for goose food. And the thing is with ducks, if you've ever watched a duck walk, it's awkward. Ducks do not walk well. So farmers grow the food, they grow the groceries, and then we flood the fields in the wintertime so that the birds can get to the groceries. In a nutshell, that's what we do. We do that through water control. Unfortunately, TVA has the opposite schedule that we want for the ducks. So when TVA is drawing down the reservoir, we're holding back rainwater in our farm fields So it makes for a really interesting scene in the winter, because we are holding water in our fields where the ducks are, and then TVA, actually, that those mud flats are well used by the cranes as a night roost at the nighttime. So it works out just fine. But if you see water on the refuge and things flooded, it's probably because Mother Nature has made it complicated for us. We do band wood ducks in the summer. Wood ducks are one of the ducks that stay here, and you probably have seen those wood duck boxes around the state. We band them to try and help estimate their population every year. We do have bats. The endangered gray bat and the Indiana bat are the two species that that we are most concerned about. And Alabama has a huge population of gray bat. Sauta Cave near Scottsboro and Fern Cave are two of the biggest populations of bats actually in the United States, of the gray bat, that is. So we do survey those. We work with cavers to help do that, because none of us are very good at it. Wildfire is sometimes used, not wildfire, excuse me, prescribed fire. We try to avoid wildfire. Prescribed burning is used on Key Cave in Florence to try to maintain historical grassland habitat in that area. And of course, we try to keep things fixed, boardwalks, trails. That is a lot of the time we spend is maintaining infrastructure. So we try to provide educational opportunities through environmental education. Under normal years, we do more in-person special events. We do a Festival of the Cranes every January, the second weekend in January. Our Friends group works together with the Decatur community, and it's still a growing festival. Something I think will grow in the future, to bring a lot of out-of-staters actually into North Alabama to see the cranes and to see what we have to offer here in this part of the state. Fishing and hunting is a big part of what we try to provide the public. We have a hunting permit that you can pick up from us that indicates what seasons we have and what regs there are for that. And of course, wildlife observation kind of goes without saying, you know. We get a lot of photographers, well, probably like you and me, that just love seeing wild animals in their natural habitat. So our big thing is trying to connect people with nature, especially in an urbanizing society. You know, it can be a challenge. So we're doing our best to try to provide places for people to recreate, to appreciate the wildlife resource that Alabama actually has an incredible wildlife resource. One of the most biodiverse states, well, probably the most biodiverse state in the country as far as variety of species. So we have a lot of interesting partnerships in place already to help us do that. The Decatur Library posts a storybook along one of our trails twice a year to help get kids out reading out in nature about something nature related. We work together with the Cook Museum. They've been a wonderful partner these last 2 years as they've expanded. More recently, the Tennessee River Line is a program that the University of Tennessee at Knoxville has been a big part of, to try to capitalize on our river resource, the different municipalities along the river. I know Huntsville is a partner in Decatur, and I'm not sure Madison may be as well. And so I foresee the refuge working together with these cities in the near future to help take care of the river, but also to spur recreational development along the river. So that's something interesting coming forward. And right now we're actually lucky. Several years back, Congress had set aside just over $5 million for the refuge to make improvements on our buildings, on our trails, on our water access. And so we're in the middle of trying to finalize plans for those boardwalks, the visitor center upgrades, a new photo blind. And so that's all forthcoming here in the next year or so. Very exciting set of possibilities, and something we hope to be able to share with everybody pretty soon. So I'm gonna land on this slide a minute here, and I'm gonna see if anybody has any questions a moment. I know I went through that faster than I wanted to.
I have a question.
Yes.
What are your major issues in Wheeler, and are you doing anything for the monarch butterflies?
Yeah, major issues as far as wildlife is concerned.
Well, funding is always a problem, but yeah.
Well, right. So the monarch, I'll touch on the monarch butterfly first. We've done a few plots. We have one plot at our headquarters office actually that was specifically planted for the monarch. We're not in the primary migratory route for them, but we do see them, as I'm sure you're well aware. Mostly what we're able to do right now is to reduce mowing on our roadsides until after that, until after the monarch migration has occurred. So you'll notice in August that our roadsides look really shabby. And that is why, because we're trying to leave those wildflowers in place until after most of the butterflies have been able to use them. Is there more we could do for the monarch? Yes. I think it's more a question of capacity as far as the refuge goes. I think there's also a big opportunity for smaller landowners too with the monarch, providing stopover habitat. So I think there's room for growth, but limited capacity on the refuge's side right now. You know, one way we're able to increase our capacity is through volunteers. We use them to help run our visitor center. We use them to help just double check our trails, do trail checks, whatnot. And I hope to use them more in the future, along with some of our nonprofit partners, to help start a regional, an area-wide litter pickup, because we all know the Tennessee River carries a lot of trash. But we do also have problems, actually, especially in Madison County, with illegal dumping on the refuge. So geocaching, interesting question. Not technically permitted, but we have a virtual cache. The name is escaping me this morning. I had a volunteer work on creating one. So there's actually not a physical cache on the refuge. Well, there are some. They're not supposed to be there, but we created a virtual cache that has questions, and I'll have to share that with you guys at a later time. I'll share that with John when I can remember what it's called. So something like a geocache, but we try to stay away from anything that that leaves something on the refuge, generally speaking.
David, as far as numbers go, have you seen, can you put a percentage on increased usage since the pandemic?
So I would say, and I've been working on trying to have a better count. I would say our usage probably almost doubled in April and May of last year. Since then, it's come down a little bit, and our buildings have not been open since March, because we rely on our volunteers to run them, our visitor center. But we've seen a steady, like there's been no drop in visitation to the refuge. If anything, it's been increased. So that's a very positive thing in my mind. It's brought people back out into nature. So yeah, somewhere between normal and twice as much. I think we're closer to normal again now, but
If a
Hey,
bunch of us
David,
came out,
I have
Go
a
ahead, Bob.
question for you. Can you
Sure.
hear me?
Yes.
I see you have biking and hiking trails. Is there a drive-through tour, ability to drive through to see some of the features?
Good question. There is the ability to drive through. What we don't have is a designated driving route. Some refuges have like a driving tour that's like a circle drive, you know. We don't have that. We've talked about it for quite some time. It came up big probably about 10 years ago. And it never happened. It's something that could happen in the future, I would say, but it would be a big undertaking. The biggest challenge we have is the place that we would consider doing it would be the White Springs Dike, between the Decatur Bridge and the 65 Bridge. That's where most of our ducks spend the winter. One of the challenges, it's such a dangerous area to access from Highway 20. And the other one is it would be very unsure what the disturbance would be to the wildlife. There are some roads you can drive on the refuge, but I don't have an easy answer for you. I should, yeah, there are roads you can drive. There's not very many in the wintertime. There's many more in the summertime. Our refuge map shows where those roads are, but what it doesn't show you is when they're closed. Does that answer your question? Probably not really.
It does. It would be nice to be able to drive out and just, drive through to see what all's out there.
Yeah. So this winter, I put together a winter birding guide that gives about 8 locations of places you can drive to, but it does involve a little bit of walking with a few of them. So thanks for that suggestion, though. It's something I think we can work on in the future.
if a bunch of us came out next weekend for a hike, can you recommend a trail?
The Beaver Dam Boardwalk, off of the county line road just south of the 565, is probably my favorite walk through a Tupelo swamp.
That's about 2.5 miles. Is that right?
Probably 2. It's probably, well, yeah, probably about 2 total. It's about a mile out from my experience.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a hiking and biking guide on our website as well. And that highlights some of the gravel roads for longer routes. The White Springs Dike would be one that's about 8 miles if you're looking for birds this time of the year. But I see I'm about ready to run out of time, so I don't want to let it cut me off. So thank you all for having me. Feel free to call us at our visitor center or email me if I can help you further. I'd be happy to entertain your questions that way.
All right, Park Ranger Young, thank you so much for for joining us today and sharing this information. I think you've succeeded in one thing. A bunch of us are going to go out there next week, and I think it's supposed to be prettier. Chris had a great idea, and maybe organizing that. And thank you for your recommendation on the trail. So we should be out there. For me, experiencing it my first time, and maybe my first time of many. So you shared good information with us. With that being said, yeah, David's contact information there. It was a great presentation. I don't think anybody was hopefully resting their eyes. If they were, somebody will send me those slides, I'm sure. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and finish with the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do first.
Is it true?
The truth.
Second.
Is it fair?
Fair to all concerned.
Third.
Will it
build
Friendships.
And fourth.
Will it be
Beneficial.
All concerned.
Okay, thank you all. And one last thing, we might have a hybrid meeting next week. So more to come on that, but next week we may go back to hybrid versus fully virtual. So with that, everybody have a great Thursday.
Dude.
Good night.